I think the Native Americans are right. I think that's what it is.
I think it's a really old story. I think it's a really old story. So that's what I think.
There's a reason why their bodies haven't been found. There's a reason. I think when they're in a third dimensional environment, they're subject to our third dimensional rules.
Welcome to the I Believe in Bigfoot Project. My name is Kelly Lockman. I am the director of the new web series, I Believe in Bigfoot, available on YouTube and Rumble now. And this is a documentary series delving into the subject of Bigfoot. And I want to use this video podcast as kind of an opportunity to go into some areas that we may not get a chance to quite cover in the show. And in this episode, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things hinted at in I Believe in Bigfoot Chapter 2. I did an entire episode on Ron Morehead's recordings of the Sierra Sounds. And when I did, I also played some clips of Joe Rogan talking about the Sierra Sounds and listening to them. And one thing that came to my attention pretty quickly is that the Bigfoot world has a bone to pick with Joe Rogan. The comment section was lit up with people mad at Joe for his apparent dismissal of the Bigfoot phenomenon. And, I'm familiar with that. I've seen Joe talk about the Bigfoot phenomenon quite a few times and in some very disparaging ways. But I want to first show the clip that I played and then also go on into showing some other things that Joe has said about the topic that I actually think would line him up more closely with myself and where even Ron Morehead lands on the subject of Bigfoot and why he may have kind of evolved his thought process in those ways. And then we'll end the episode today with a very interesting clip from Tucker Carlson as well on the Shawn Ryan podcast that I think you'll find very interesting. So first of all, let me show kind of the clip that got folks mad at Joe from my episode here.
Ronald J. Morehead and Alan Berry, maybe? Is that right?
Yes, Ron Morehead. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. The Sierra Mountains. That's what it is. Right. And so it's the weirdest shit ever. Just listen to this. You're going to...
I read what it could be, but we'll listen first.
It could be bullshit.
Yeah,
That's what it could be.
So, with that, you get it. People watch that and they're like, Joe's being so dismissive. But recently, he was talking with Jeff Dye, who apparently is a pretty big proponent of Bigfoot. And the conversation took a shift, a very deep shift in, I think, Joe's understanding and the way he's looking at this subject overall. And I found this very interesting. And I'm going to play that clip for you now. And I think his thought process, it's not evolving in a vacuum. And I'll show you why I think he has come to some of these conclusions now.
Say that's like the most frustrating part about the Bigfoot subject is you got guys like who really no, I think an ape could, like a pod of apes could live out here and this thing. And so you'll start to, guys like me will be like, yeah, this makes good sense. And then they'll get a Native American to talk about it. And he'll be like, it's the magic man of the woods. And you're like, no. And they're like, he disappears. He flies. He can stop the rain. And you go, nah, that's just, gosh dang it. We were making real good ground here, making arguments for it to be an ape.
I think the Native Americans are right. I think that's what it is.
Some
I think
sort of paranormal woods
thing?
thing?
I do.
Yeah.
I think it's listen, if let's imagine that states of consciousness can interface with other things that are around us all the time that we don't necessarily see. Now, we know that's true if you take psychedelics, and we know that psychedelics are produced in the brain. I can imagine a moment where you are in such a state that you could see something that you would not be able to see under normal conditions. It doesn't.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think that there are times where you could potentially see things that you might not normally see under normal conditions. And I know that starts to sound very woo-woo or even like, oh, well, yeah, sure, if you're high. But that's not what Joe's talking about. He's talking about a principle in a roundabout sort of way that was addressed in the halls of Congress recently in relation to the UFO phenomenon. That's why I started off with saying, if UFOs, and then he kind of changed course a little bit. Check this clip out from David Grush in the halls of Congress talking about the holographic principle of the UFO phenomenon. Now, I think this is really critically important to understand that there may be some kind of interdimensionality to what's going on here. And I know for a lot of people that's a big jump, but bear with me. This is what our congressmen are being briefed on and talking about.
With that being said, and the other statement that has been made that was intriguing to me it's intriguing because my view has been that we are billions of light years away from any other system. And the concept that an alien species that's technologically advanced enough to travel billions of light years gets here and somehow is incompetent enough to not survive Earth or crashes is something that I find a little bit far-fetched. And with that being said, you have mentioned that there's interdimensional potential. Could you expound on that?
Yeah, to answer your first question, and I'm here as a fact witness and expert, but I will give you a theoretical framework, at least to work off, to kind of espouse crashes, regardless of your level of sentience, right? Planes crash, cars crash, n number of sorties, however high, a small percentage are going to end in mission failure, if you will, as we say in the Air Force. And then in terms of multidimensionality, that kind of thing, the framework that I'm familiar with, for example, is something called the holographic principle. It derives itself from general relativity and quantum mechanics, and that is, if you want to imagine a 3D object such as yourself casting a shadow onto a 2D surface, that's the holographic principle. So you can be projected, quasi-projected from higher dimensional space to lower dimensional. It's a scientific trope that you can actually cross, literally, as far as I understand, but there's probably guys with PhDs that we could probably argue about that.
But you have.
So that is wild, right? I think that's an incredible thing to realize for folks that haven't been paying attention to kind of where we're at with UFO disclosure in this country, is that we now have whistleblowers that are saying that potentially these things are not aliens from another planet. Potentially there's something else going on here. Okay. Now, I know for a lot of people, the idea of Bigfoot is its own thing. It's a relic hominid. It's out in the woods. It's a lost ape or lost humanoid of some kind. I get that. I understand where you're coming from. That being said, again, I think that the criticism of, well, why isn't there more evidence is honestly a valid criticism, unless there's something stranger going on. And I want to play another clip of David Grush talking about the bodies that have been recovered from some of these space crashes. And again, just bear with me. I think you'll start to understand where I'm going with this train of thought. I know I'm talking about UFOs, but I do think that these phenomenons are interrelated. Listen to what he says when questioned about the source of these biologics that they have recovered.
Referred to the phenomenon as non-human intelligence. Why deviate from the basis of extraterrestrial life?
I think the phenomenon is very complex, and I like to leave an open mind analytically to specific origin.
When you say specific origin, are you referring, can you elaborate on that for those that might not?
If it's a traditional extraterrestrial origin or something else that we don't quite understand from either a biological or astrophysics perspective, I just like to keep an open mind on what it could be.
So for a second, think about the significance of what he just said there. For years, at least since the 1940s, 50s, we have had this notion, very particular notions and very odd notions about the phenomenons, both of Bigfoot and aliens, as being this kind of new thing. We're talking about Bigfoot. This is kind of a kitschy, pop cultural, but potentially real, lost, anthropomorphic animal. Then you have the UFO phenomenon, the Roswell crash, the other flying saucer sightings of the 1940s and 50s and 60s, and you have this kind of sci-fi idea of what that means. Those are very new interpretations of very, very old phenomenon. And this is what I want to just completely drive home for anybody that's paid attention this far in this little segment. This is something that has always existed. Both phenomenons have always existed. I'm not saying they're completely related, but I tend to think that they probably are. But these are something that have been spoken of in folklores forever. Some people described the UFOs as angels or demons, fairies, all these things. Jacques Vallée has done some incredible work in this regard. Probably most popular ufologist that has gone down this rabbit trail. And then a good friend of mine, Josh Cutchin, has written a good deal about Bigfoot in a similar regard with Tim Renner. They co-authored the books Where the Footprints In. And I interviewed Josh and got to go on some Bigfoot outings with him during the making of this documentary, and you'll see more of that later. But I do want to play a clip of Josh talking about how this phenomenon relates to other phenomenons. I think this is really important stuff.
If you take a look at the things that happen in the forest in what the BFRO calls Class B reports, they bear a startling resemblance to a lot of the activity that you see in poltergeist infestations. We're talking about things like thrown stones that are often warm, anomalous vocalizations, footprints even, strange smells, just strange noises, and of course the knocks. I mean, knocks are a very, very common poltergeist manifestation. The only thing that really differentiates those Class B Bigfoot reports from a traditional poltergeist infestation that you find in a house is the setting. So, a strange light seen in the sky as a UFO, a strange light seen in an old house is a ghost, and a strange light seen around a Neolithic ring fort is a fairy in the old world. And so the poltergeist / Wildnisgeist idea is sort of an outgrowth of that observation. Lots of cryptozoologists have noted that some of these Bigfoot reports sound a lot like poltergeist activity, but I came up with the idea of Wildnisgeist as wilderness spirit, to use this term, because unless you saw Bigfoot, you can't guarantee that Bigfoot did it. I think that this idea that this may be some sort of spirit manifestation gets a little bit of additional strength from the fact that in a lot of poltergeist activity, people report hairy things. So the two places that you would see poltergeists were in like a traditional haunting, maybe associated with some of that old world fairy phenomena, but you'd also see it in seances. And as luck would have it, one of the most common manifestations in seances is the manifestation of hairy hands or other hairy appendages. And there are examples from the historical record where people in seances have seen things that look like cavemen or large apes or large hairy wildmen. Stan Gooch, who was a researcher and paranormal author, saw something to that description himself. And you can find that right there in the writings. So you have poltergeist activity in seances, and you have these sort of wildmen figures manifesting in seances. Who's to say that something similar isn't happening in our forests, and we just don't recognize it as such because we have this Bigfoot mythology around?
I couldn't agree more with what Josh just said there. Who's to say that something similar to what has been reported for eons, right, about different unexplained phenomenon is happening in our forests, and we just don't recognize it because we have this modern mythos baked into our brains as to what we should be perceiving. And, whether it's, whatever kind of indoctrination you have, and certainly pop culture is an incredibly indoctrinating force, that is going to color the way that you see even baseline evidence of things, right? One thing that I take issue with a lot of the flesh and blood Bigfoot advocates out there is their lack of willingness to entertain eyewitness testimony when it doesn't fit with their narrative. I heard Cliff Brockman, and I'm not trying to throw Cliff under the bus or anything like that, but I did hear him on a podcast recently saying that he just flat out isn't interested in eyewitness testimony. He's more interested in things that he can quantify, like trackways, things that he can observe himself and scientifically document. And he was basically saying that the testimony of human beings is a very unscientific way of gathering information on this stuff. I disagree. I mean, just think about it on its premise. That's a ridiculous thing to say. Before cameras and before modern recording devices of any kind, we were sketching. Like the Audubon Society would go out, observe animal behavior, write about that animal behavior, and sketch that animal behavior. Human beings are actually a great source of information. We're fallible. We may forget things. We may sometimes even make up things to get attention. I get it. That being said, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and you can't say that all of this testimony that disagrees with what you have a predisposition for is invalid. And a lot of folks, when they have Bigfoot encounters, they see anomalous lights. They have situations that appear to be supernatural, apportations, meaning that, like, objects just appearing or rocks falling from the sky, seemingly having no source, rancid smells that seem to have no source. All of these things, like Josh was saying, if they happen in your house, it means it's a poltergeist. If you see strange lights in the sky, it means it's a UFO. But if you see them in the woods and you have all these things happen to you in the woods, it must be a Bigfoot. Okay, well, I think this is very, very interesting and very important kind of things to be thinking about here. And I want to play a clip of Ron Morehead going into some of his ideas about how he thinks these things may be doing what they're doing. Ron is not only a Bigfoot experiencer, but a wonderful author. He wrote Quantum Bigfoot and Bigfoot Unveiled, where he gets into his theories about these creatures and how they can kind of do the supernatural things that they do. Whereas Josh is much more comfortable with the vocabulary of folklore and legend and spiritism. Ron is definitely more comfortable with the language of science and quantum physics and things like that. I think both are fine. It's tomato as far as I'm concerned. Whatever language you're comfortable with, they're getting at the same basic conclusions. But I'll play this clip from Ron because I think he can explain it better than I can.
There's a reason why their bodies haven't been found. There's a reason. I think when they're in a third dimensional environment, they're subject to our third dimensional rules until they get out of it. And that they can disappear. I've heard so many reports of them disappearing, but if energy can change into matter, matter can change into energy, they are interchangeable. According to Einstein, according to quantum physics, matter and energy are interchangeable. Dr. Paul Dirac, like I mentioned earlier, he's got a Nobel Prize in 1933 for antimatter. So antimatter exists. It's all established physically by CERN in 2012. Matter and energy are interchangeable. If these things have a way of changing their frequency into energy, from their matter into energy, that would cause their trackways to disappear, which we've heard about for years, how they follow a trackway, then all of a sudden it just stops. Well, researchers, including myself, when you hear that, you think these people are off their rocker. A helicopter couldn't have picked them up. You know how these things stop making a track. Then you find out that really in quantum physics and in reality, which quantum physics is, if there is we're not in reality, by the way, a trackway, if these things can disappear, change their mass into energy, their trackways, there would be no more density and their trackways would stop.
Right. So what Ron was alluding to, and I should have set that clip up a little better. Ron, for those of you that don't know, had a lot of strange and unusual experiences in the Sierra camp beyond the voices. So in addition to capturing the Sierra sounds, which, like I said, is the subject of Chapter 2 of my docuseries, Ron also experienced anomalous lights, UFOs, for lack of a better term. I mean, they were unidentified flying objects. He experienced a lot of strange and unusual things at that Sierra camp that for years he didn't talk about because the culture wasn't really at a place where it could hear it. You know, Ron, Al Berry, and the other guys that recorded those sounds were, you know, they felt like they had gathered some real evidence, and so they didn't want to taint people's perspective of that evidence by saying, oh yeah, in addition to the fact that there were these large gigantic hairy monsters up there making all these crazy sounds, I think they may also be able to turn into a beam of light, right? Like that doesn't really do a lot of good, especially in the 1970s, to kind of solidify the story. And especially, I mean, you think about it, the Patty Gimlin film had come out. For people that were interested in that kind of thing, you know, it was guys like Peter Byrne, people that were hardcore hunters and cryptozoologists, and people that believed that they were looking for a ape. They were looking for a North American wood ape. They weren't willing to go all the way and say that there was something even more unusual than that out there potentially. So guys like Ron kind of paved the way for that, for us to have this kind of conversation now. Now, I do want to close by playing a clip of Tucker Carlson on the Shawn Ryan show, talking about what he thinks kind of the origins of a lot of this phenomenon, the UFO phenomenon, which I think, given his conclusions, would also link into the Bigfoot phenomenon, because a lot of people believe that this Bigfoot phenomenon does tie into mythologies, and particularly Christian mythologies. You have the angelic beings manipulating the daughters of men and creating giants and men of renown and all these things. A lot of folks speculate. Certainly Scott Carpenter, Melba Ketchum's DNA research, and a lot of people draw from those conclusions because they identified certain strains of DNA that they recognized as human, and then other strands of DNA that were non-human and unexplained. So a lot of folks speculate that these are, in fact, the descendants of the Nephilim that are recorded in the Bible. And the Bible has lots of accounts of giants, describes their faces as being horrible to look at. Josephus talks about it, but the Greek myths talk about it as well. The Sumerian texts, even, you know, Gilgamesh and all these things talk about these bestial men. So check out what Tucker Carlson has to say about this. I think this is very interesting to see where we're at with the zeitgeist of our conversations about unexplained phenomenon. I think that there is an explanation. It's a very old explanation.
Here's what I'm really surprised by, and I've actually stopped gathering string on, as we say in reporting, stopped gathering string in this, gathering information, because I'm satisfied that I know enough, and I don't really want to know that much more. Because what I think I know is, you know, this doesn't help me at all to know that. So that's a conclusion I've reached. I'm usually pretty curious. I've stopped being curious about this because I don't want to know anymore. But
you truly don't want to know anymore about it.
I think I know. I think I know what's up. So I can't prove it, so probably not going to articulate it, but I think I know what's up, yeah. But
can you articulate it?
Well, I think it's a really old story. I think it's a really old story. So that's what I think.
What is it?
Well, one, I'm a Christian, and I am fairly sincere about it. I try to be sincere about it. More sincere than ever, for sure. But one thing that you notice about every world religion I'm familiar with, I'm interested in that topic, there are commonalities between religions. Jesus is unique, and I believe in Jesus. So I don't believe in any kind of pantheology, okay? I don't think they're all equal or anything like that. I think mine is correct. I think that. Sorry. But there are commonalities that are very striking between all world religions I'm aware of and all creation myths. And one of them, and this is of course true for Christianity, very true, is that the belief that supernatural beings take physical form. They all believe that. The Greek myths, Jesus, most famously, but that they take physical form, that they're not just like some ethereal, they're not just shadows floating around, specters, fog, that they're physical. Like they're as real as the arm of your chair. And that they reproduce with people. Again, Christianity believes that. Jesus, immaculate conception, spirit reproduces with human woman. That's what the story is.
He is correct. That is what the story is. It's believed by billions of people around this world, that spirit can dwell and intermingle with flesh. And this is This has been taught for eons. This is in the Bible. This is in the Greek myths. This is in every mythology known to man. Now, I know I may be getting ahead of some folks. I know a lot of people are like, yeah, I know, we know this is not new news. A lot of people have been talking about this for years. I'm not new to this. However, there's a whole other camp of people out there that completely reject it and are firmly rooted into this kind of idea of reality being this three-dimensional time and space, this linear atheistic model of a somehow spontaneous set of chemical reactions that have led us to where we are now. I get that, and for those of you that believe that, but also believe that there is some kind of Bigfoot out there, I guess I understand the hesitance to talk about things like this, but you are doing yourself a disservice because you're just ignoring what other human beings have observed seemingly since the beginning of time about this phenomenon. And, either there is a unseen realm that can sometimes, like Tucker dramatically pointed out when he slapped the chair on the Shawn Ryan show, can be as physical as anything in this three-dimensional world. Take the story in Genesis where the three angels and one, Abraham, recognizes as God, speaks to him as the God, right? These three angels visit Abraham before they are going to go wipe out Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham feeds them. He feeds them beef and cheese, and they eat with him. But they are clearly identified as spiritual beings, right? In the resurrection of Christ, he comes and he eats fish and makes these guys breakfast. But, we have these traditions. Every culture, it's not just Christianity, but every culture has these traditions of spirit beings that can manifest completely physically. And I think that may be what we're seeing with the Bigfoot phenomenon. I'm sorry that I can't explain it much better than that, but I think that the circumstantial evidence tends to point that way. And, Ron Morehead will be quick to say, and is fond of saying, that he thinks there's many different kinds, that some of them may be more physical, some of them may be more, for lack of a better term, supernatural. Love him or hate him, Tucker Carlson is a very mainstream figure. And for someone as mainstream as Tucker Carlson to talk about the things that he was just talking about right there, to slap the chair in Shawn Ryan's podcast and say that some things can be physical, just as physical as you and I, and also become immaterial and exist in some other dimension or some other spiritual reality, that lets you know that the dial has shifted a lot. It has turned. We're not having the same kind of conversations out loud in the public discourse that we were just 10, 15 years ago. We're talking about interdimensional aliens. We're talking about, legend as fact. Now this is something that a lot of folks have always believed. Certainly the billions of Christians and Muslims and Jewish folks and other religions as well, Hindus, that believe in a spiritual a tradition. But popular culture has been taken over for the past, 100 years maybe, by the materialistic atheist mindset. And that's certainly been the dominant mindset of a lot of academia. If you can't prove it within those materialistic constructs and with the predisposition towards, a linear set of chemical reactions leading us to this point in space and time, then they didn't have much room or grace for outside opinion. And many people still don't. But I think that the tide is turning, and it's turning in a very new but old way. And I think that's a good thing. I think that we're going to get closer in the next few years to understanding the nature of reality and truth than we have for quite a long time as a species. And I'm, for one, excited about it. And I'm excited to show you guys more of what I've seen and discovered in my own little adventures out there, and show you some more of the people that I've got to talk to along this way. And I hope you can bear with me and keep an open mind, because the truth is out there, as the cliche says. And we may not fully find it. I think that, if you could fully comprehend the truth, that would make you God, right? And we're never going to get there. So the best we can do is ask questions, and that's what we'll continue to do. And if you like this content, please let me know in the comments, and I'll make more of these style videos. And if you want to see the web series, please check that out. Like I said, it's on YouTube and Rumble. And if you go out there looking for Bigfoot, be careful, my friends.